Ms. Munoz, will you please introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rosa Munoz, the interpreter and translator for the district. I'll be here helping with any questions or comments you may have. Thank you. Buenas noches a todos. Soy Rosa Muñoz, soy la intérprete y traductora del distrito. Estoy aquí para ayudarle con cualquier pregunta o comentario que puedan tener. Gracias.
Thank you, Ms. Munoz. Welcome to everyone here and those of you joining us virtually to this October 17th Dover Board of Education meeting. For those who wish to provide public comment remotely, a Google form was posted on the district website at 6:30 p.m., and those remote comments will be addressed in the second public comment section. This meeting, which is hereby called to order at 6:31 p.m., is in compliance with the notice requirements of the law. Public notice was posted in the office of the Board of Education and communicated to the municipal clerk and the Daily Record on January 10th, 2023. Can we please rise for the flag salute? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Sullivan, may we have a roll call?
Ms. Azevedo?
Here.
Ms. Downs?
Present.
Ms. Gonzalez?
Present.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Ms. Nutting?
Here.
Ms. Phillips?
Here.
Mr. Robles?
Present.
Dr. Sainer?
Present.
Ms. Mendez?
Here. Dr. Sainer, will you please read our mission statement?
Working together as a community, our mission is to welcome all and provide opportunities for our students in a safe and accepting learning environment to become creative, empathetic, resilient, and who choose to make an impact.
Thank you. I will now pass it over to Dr. McLaughlin to introduce this evening's presentations.
Okay, we have two presentations tonight. We're going to begin with Mr. Pandolfo and Mr. Carl, who will be presenting this year's New Jersey State Learning Assessment results.
Just working.
Bless you.
Bless you. Thank you.
Thanks, Diego. All right. Thank you so much for having us here tonight to present the NJSLA results. The exam that was given, the state exams that were given this past spring. As Dr. McLaughlin mentioned, I'm here with Mr. Rory Carl, Director of Curriculum and Instruction as well. So some things before we look into the data, and the data based on state averages isn't looking too rosy, but please consider it's just one source of data. And that the MSGPs, that was a score that we were supposed to get based on the exams this year. We were told the state that this was coming in. They have not come in yet. And an MSGP is really, that really accentuates the growth model. So what a medium student growth percentile MSGP is, a student is put in a cohort with their academic peers based on their exam score from the previous year or previous 2 years. In this case, it would just been 1 year due to the COVID interruption. And they're given a median score of how they scored against those particular peer groups. And then that score goes to the teacher, and they're put in order that way. And then the teacher gets a median test score, then the school gets a median test score, and then ultimately the district gets a median test score that reflects growth. And traditionally, Dover, all the schools have done very, very well in this area, but that's just not a stat that we have right now. So one thing I want to bring up is that as educators, We go to, in our undergraduate degree, we take a lot of courses on assessment and then more intense courses when we go and get our master's degree. And if you look at the data in most cases, on most grade levels, throughout the entire state, more than 50% of the students are not meeting expectations, and in some cases, it's over 80% of the students that aren't meeting expectations. So with that in mind, and the training we get as educators, honestly, we really would be challenging the actual validity of the tools they're using themselves. We also know that about 25% of the students who take the English Language Arts test are either getting their instruction in Spanish or the ESL program. So students who come in new to the country, into our district, for the first year, they're exempt from taking the English Language Arts test. Many of these students, though, are placed in a bilingual program, and improperly they're getting mostly they're getting their instruction in Spanish. So then at their second year in the district, they have to take this English Language Arts test, and there's no Spanish adaptation for that test, and they've had primarily their instruction in Spanish. So you can see how there definitely would be a lot of frustration in our students taking that particular exam, and be very, if you imagine yourself taking a test in another language that you don't know, it definitely would not yield good results. With the math test, there is a Spanish adaptation. However, a lot of our students are coming from places where the rigor of the math assessment or the math standards themselves aren't very high. New Jersey is known nationally as having very high standards compared to other states around the country. We also know that there are students who have their interruption in their educational process, so the links to learning are definitely not there. So the interruption creates a situation where the curriculum may continue, but they definitely have a broken chain of where to pick up the mathematical concepts. In addition, there are also students who, so if a student comes to us during the testing window, let's say in May, we have to make sure that student gets tested. So they're taking, in many cases, these particular students, they're taking a test where they have never seen any of the concepts that they're being asked to complete, but the state says that they have to test. So that's definitely an issue with testing in general. Our internal data, though, does say that our students are making progress. So even though some of the scores you're going to look at don't look great, there's definitely some sun shining through the clouds. So on this particular slide, we compare the state comparison and Dover's comparison from last year to this year. So in the district, so if you look at language arts, in the district we actually, our passing rate went down a point. In mathematics, our passing rate went up about a point. The problem is that with this, if you actually look at the state averages in language arts went up by over 8 points and almost 6 points in mathematics. So we can see that if you look at it that way, the learning gap between the district and the state is growing. But again, this is only one source of data. And then there's definitely similar with the algebra, the geometry, and the science. There's definitely a similar trend there. Okay. All right, so in this particular slide, we see the school met or exceeded the schools compared to the state averages of all the tests. So that language, that 51.2%, that's all of the students that took the test combined. All right, and then you see that we are below state averages in language arts and in math and the other subjects, with the exception of the middle school. In Algebra 1 at the middle school, 80% of the students passed that particular exam, with 35% comparatively to 35% of the students throughout the whole state. I mean, that definitely seems like a trend at the middle school. They're doing something right over there without a doubt, because that just seems like they're doing that almost every year, where they're really well above average in that 8th grade Algebra 1 classes. In the next 3 slides, we compare the passing rate to the state by grade level. And that's, but in the middle, we put in if the students were in the district 3 or more years. So with the idea being that the longer the students are with us, the more likelihood they're going to have success. So we can see that every grade level is below the state passing rate. If we see that students are in the district 3 years or more, we see that we're still below the state passing rate in most cases, but we're definitely closer to the state passing rate. The exception with that is in the sixth grade language arts, 51.3% is actually above the state average when you consider students in the district 3 years or more. You know, at the middle school, we already spoke about the algebra students and what a great job they're doing, how they're well above the averages. And again, the entire population is below the state averages, but if you take the 7th and 8th grade language arts tests and students who are in the district 3 years or more, they are actually above state averages. And the one wonky stat I want to point out here, the idea is in almost every case it's true that students who are with us and are in the district for lengths of time, they actually do better, which would make sense. That 6.8% means that there were actually a couple of students who came into the district later and actually did better than the students that were already here. And I would definitely, that stat really doesn't make any sense. But if you actually look at that assessment, 17.8% of the students in the entire state met the expectations on that exam, meaning that 82.2% of students did not meet the expectations. I mean, that is such an egregious number. I really would challenge the actual 8th grade math test itself as being a valid tool. At Dover High School, we can see that they were again below state averages, but if again 3 years or more in the district with the 9th grade language arts, they're actually well above the state average. There's a similarly in algebra, geometry, and science, below state averages, with algebra 1 being well below the state average, which is definitely, no matter how you look at it, is definitely an area of concern. So we're required by the state to report on the subgroups that we have in our district. There has to be at least 10 students in each of the subgroups. So you see the letters NA up there. In those particular categories, there weren't enough students to report, and that's to protect their identity. And there's some scores, you look at some of the subgroups, they're a bit of an outlier. They're above what our mean averages. But they're more than 10, but there's not a significant number in that particular group. There is a pretty good amount of numbers in the English language arts learners. I want to bring your attention to that. MLL, multilingual learners, is now the most up-to-date terminology, but even the state on the reporting sheets listed as ELL. But you can see, they're really struggling, and we honestly understand why. Touched on in the beginning of why they're struggling. So if you look at it with students who are the students who were not in the English language learners in that particular subgroup, we can see that we are, in most cases, we're getting there. We're pretty close to state averages, not too far away. But the stat that really is, I think, the most important and the most telling of what's going on in the district, if you actually take the students who used to be English language learners, multilingual learners, those students in math and language arts, they're actually above state averages. So it really does reinforce that if our students are with us long enough, they're going to definitely have more of a chance to be successful. But I really do think this is a powerful stat, and really the students and the teachers that have prepared them really should feel really good about this particular stat in general. So at this time, I'm going to turn over the mic to Mr. Carl, who's going to talk about the different internal data and the different programs that are going on here in the district.
Thank you, Mr. Pandolfo. Good evening, everybody. Roy Carl, Director of Curriculum Instruction. I'm just going to bring up this next slide here. So Mr. Pandolfo highlighted some of the challenges with any state assessment. We've talked a lot, in this forum about it's a snapshot of this one moment in time. There's questions about validity of assessments when you see averages in the state in the 30s. But all of that aside, the real factor we want to focus on is growth. And the challenge is we have not received that information back from the state yet, and it is mid-October. But we as a district have had that information for a few weeks with the iReady diagnostic, which I know we've talked a lot about here. And I wanted to share the growth that we've seen to really highlight. So the top section is where we were last fall in mathematics when the students took that assessment at the end of September. So you can see we had 36% of our students in grades K through 8 who are 3 or more grade levels below. We have now reduced that. If you look below, is our most recent data that just came back about almost 3 weeks ago. That number has now decreased down to 21% in 1 year. And we talk about making a year's worth of growth, and we saw this in the data last year. Our average student made over a year's worth of growth. And we're seeing that in these statistics. So even when we look at 2 or more grade levels below, we see 20%. And down below, you might say, wait, that's up to 28%. But yes, we've taken those 3 or more below, and now we've made them 2 below. And if we keep that progression going, we've now seen a lot of those students get into that 42%, 1 grade level below. That is work we can do within this year. It is work we have already been doing, and we didn't need to wait for the state to get that information back. Same for reading. So looking at the top, last year in the beginning of 2022, we had 37% of students who were 3 or more grade levels below in reading. That number has now dropped down to 29%. And again, we're seeing the reds decrease, the yellows get a little bit bigger, leading into that green section, and by the end of the year, we'll see that growth across the district. So just looking at some strategies for success, things that we've talked about so we can develop a little bit further. The first for mathematics, creating and analyzing NJSLA evidence. So I wanted to take this time to really share how we do that as a district, how we do that as departments, the work we do with this data. So I'm not going to jump too much yet because I have a slide to show you next. The next one is building thinking classrooms. So we launched this last year in grades 7 through 12. We realized that students coming out of COVID and just in general needed a change in their math classroom. It was no longer a forum where students sit in their seats, listen to the teacher, the I do, we do, you do approach. The students now collaborate from the start of class together. They're up around the room, they're working on their whiteboards, and they are communicating and collaborating about mathematics. It's one of the coolest things to walk by and see, and it is in that we have given the students back the power to expand their knowledge in mathematics and to communicate with one another. And all of those real world aspects that you want them to have, we're doing within our math classrooms. The utilization of iReady, we're gonna share how that information goes instantly to the teacher and how they can use that data to drive instruction and how they've been using that data to drive instruction already over these past couple weeks. I have more information coming on that one. We're in year 2 of our new math program. So we just saw the growth from that data, and that was in a first-year launch. A first-year launch of any program is challenging. It's learning something that is brand new, regardless of the amount of support you get. It's brand new. And in that first year, we made that kind of growth. Now year 2, okay, I'm a little bit more comfortable. Things are really working. I think we're gonna see that increase at the end of this year. And finally, the Linkit benchmark assessment for mathematics. So at the high school level, we're using Linkit for Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. We're also using it in language arts and in science, and we'll be expanding that to other departments as well. And I'll share what that information looks like. For language arts, K to 2 has a redesigned reading blocks. We're now focusing on phonics, phonemic awareness, decoding skills, and center work. Grades 2 through 6 now have the full implementation of the Reader's Workshop. And teachers started off this year with brand new classroom libraries in grades K through 8. So I want to give a big shout out to our language arts supervisor, Ms. Sarno, for the work she put into bring libraries that connect with our students, things that students are interested in. That was a lot of work, but it was important, critical work, and being in the classrooms and seeing the students so excited to have an endless library of books that they're interested in is fantastic. At the middle school, a new writing curriculum, which integrates with the reading units. And at the high school, the utilization of no red ink to strengthen student writing, working with NJSLA for grades 9 through 12 to have student access to any reading content by the ability to change the reading level, and link it. So just to kind of jump in quickly, so when we get back the NJSLA reports from the state, they do not look this nice and pretty. They are very complex, and it takes some time to break them down. But what you're looking at is the data pulled out for grade 6. And the way we use this is we meet with teachers, and we start to really analyze specific trends for the NJSLA. So you can see all of the black X's. Those were questions on the NJSLA in 2021, 2022, and how our 6th graders performed. The blue X is a question on the most recent, the 2022-23 NJSLA. So we can look for trends in questions that are coming up on the assessment, but primarily you'll see those standards on the left that are highlighted in yellow. That is where our 6th grade students showed growth last year. And any area in red is an area that we are now focusing on. So how do we focus on those areas? One way, you'll see the released items. So we're looking through questions from the NJSLA and say, okay, how is this question being asked? How is it different from our approach within the classroom? And how can we connect that a little bit better? But we dive into this data early on, and we use those specific areas to really pinpoint needs for specific students and specific classes. The iReady prerequisite report. So we shared the iReady diagnostic data. As soon as the student hits submit, this report goes directly to the teacher. So if I am a teacher, let's say, I forget where I grabbed this from. Let's say this is a 4th grade classroom. It automatically groups the students for me. So now the students' names have been cut off, but picture below Group A, Group B, Group C, Group D, you see different students, and you will see their individual needs for the prerequisite material from the prior grade level. So when I start that first lesson on that first day, I know exactly who needs support and where they need that support. So I can hit the ground running. I don't need to wait for the end assessment to find out, okay, where did things go off? So that report they get instantly for every lesson throughout the year in mathematics. Link it benchmarks, math, science, language arts. These reports immediately went back to teachers. We're diving into this data now. Unlike iReady at the high school level, Link It provides that standard analysis. So we can look at an NJGPA, an NJSLA, look at Link It and say, okay, are we seeing the same trends? Where is the work that we need to do? Which standards should we really focus on first? And the last piece I just wanted to mention. So this is a new piece of iReady's connection to families and something we wanted to bring in immediately. So this is brand new. The directions for how to get here is on the Dover website. If you click Departments, Curriculum and Instruction, you will find the iReady Family Guide, both in English and in Spanish, which will just give a little overview of what iReady is, how it's used in the classroom, and a little bit about the diagnostic. But the report tonight I really want to share is the iReady Family Report. It is available in both English and in Spanish. You can watch a video if you want to learn a little bit more about iReady, but the most important piece is that code. That code, once you are in your child's account for iReady, will give you access to the family report. So you will see the diagnostic data that teachers are seeing and the growth areas that we are working on in the classroom. So how do you get on here? And I do want to say this is also available in Spanish. The code is the same, but directions are on there. So when you log into your student's account, so for security reasons, you can't just go to iReady's website, punch in the code, and be able to see student data. So you will log in with your student using their device. Students in grades K through 6 have the little QR code to scan. If you need one, please contact the teacher. They can send one home. Students in the upper grades will use their student ID. Once you're in their account, click at the top where it says 4 families, and there's that 4 families report. The next thing it will ask is, do you want the reports in English or in Spanish? And would you like math, reading, or both? Here's the information that you will get. Every time we do a diagnostic this year, so mid-year and end of year, that will populate. We'll be able to see that growth, right? Because that is the goal that we're all striving for, is student growth. The areas, so we're looking at reading, areas where they may be tested out. On the bottom, it also does give a Lexile level with a link if your child's looking for a book that they might be interested in. And then it does break down all of the domains to give information at home of what we're really working on in district, in the classes, to build upon the successes that we've already seen, very specific to each individual student. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Let's give them a round of applause, please. And then if you don't mind, we're going to field some questions from the board. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Ms. Grisales.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. It's great to see you here again. I think in Mr. Pandolfo's part of the presentation, maybe slide 3 or 4, there was a staggering number of 5% only at Dover High School, and I think you mentioned 80% at the middle school, right? I'm wondering, what barriers have you seen or have been reported to you with regard to such low scores, specifically at the high school with the NJSLA?
Yeah, so the one area that we're really looking at is the algebra scores. And one thing, you know, having the iReady data, tracking kind of this group as they moved along, that's the group where their 6th and 7th grade years were just not normal. And unfortunately, that is the foundation of Algebra 1. It starts in grade 6 as they start working on ratios and proportions, working their way up into algebraic expressions. And we saw that data, you know, coming across the middle school, but the one highlight is the middle school last year had 150% growth, meaning that the average student made a year and a half worth of growth in one school year. We met with iReady over the summer. They even said that was one of the highest growths they've seen at a middle school across the state of New Jersey. So yes, concerning, but we're already diving into that. And part of that is the building blocks building up. You know, hopefully students never go through that again, but we're monitoring and, you know, making those adjustments.
How do you see the demographics of our district impacting that low score, if at all?
I think, you know, sometimes it comes into, Mr. Pandolfo mentioned, you know, students that have not been with us for a certain length of time. One of the greatest things that Linkit has provided me is a data piece I can pull up now and look at the number of years in district as we're analyzing that data. And it is a trend. You know, the longer the students are with us, the more growth that we're seeing. And, you know, for some students, unfortunately, we only see them for a little bit. You know, they come with us and then it's, you know, graduation time. So that is, you know, one of the challenges that, you know, we monitor and we support, but it is challenging.
Thank you. And 2 more questions. Similar to what you're saying about the math scores for the middle school, what are the strategies that you're seeing being implemented that is working? And why can't we replicate those?
Yeah, so, you know, you're referring to like the Algebra 1 scores. So we did a lot of work at the middle school to really kind of revamp how we selected students to go into our Algebra 1 model. I will start by saying it's an incredible teacher. I think that's number one. It's been consistent, you know, this is year after year. In that classroom, you do work with a certain type of student, but with that combination with building thinking classrooms, I think it's just really allowed that model to be extra successful. But to answer that question too, you know, as you go around to these classrooms, we really started focusing on center work where students are together and collaborating in the same goal of a building thinking classroom. And just that with the reading workshop model and a new math program that is designed around student collaboration, that's where I think we're seeing that impact in the growth.
Thank you. And last question, what training is offered to staff in order to analyze, interpret, and then implement change based on the data from NJSLA, LinkedIn, or iReady?
Yeah, so it kind of works across the spectrum. It goes as small as we meet teachers individually. We do grade level meetings, you know, where we meet with teachers. We have Linkit coming in on November 7th to provide PD on really diving into this data warehouse that we've now created. We had, you know, the PD last year for the Ready Math program, and now this year's really focused on reading workshop and our writing.
Great. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Ms. Phillips.
So I have a question and then a comment, I guess. So the question is, with respect to the iReady family reports, how is that information relayed to the parents so that they know that that's available, they know the steps to access it? Like, is it dependent on their student to tell them, or has something gone home to them? How does that work?
Yeah, so because it's so new to us, it just launched in September. We will, provide more. We're kind of doing it. Principals are sharing it out at the schools. That will be a big part of parent-teacher conferences. So we're, using platforms such as this to try and, spread that word as fast as we can, just because it is so new. But that will be, a forever piece of our Ready program moving forward.
Okay. And then my comment, just generally speaking, I'm not trying to be negative, but like looking at those numbers, and I recognize that's just one aspect of a bigger picture, but a lot of those numbers are significantly low, and that's concerning. And I have a particular concern, which I think I've mentioned before, with respect to the high school students, because if you have, you had the chart, and you have 5% meeting or exceeding in algebra, 13%, 20 in science, 26% in geometry. Like, those numbers are significantly low. But you also had a chart where you say, some students are 2 or more levels below where they should be, and some are 3 or more levels. So I'm just going to use my daughter as an example, not saying that she is, but my daughter is a junior. So if she was 3 or more levels below where she needs to be, it's a very limited amount of time left between now and her graduation to when she would be able to catch up, or even, a freshman or any student in the high school. I feel like a lot of the stuff that you mentioned is K through 6 and middle school, but I am concerned about how you target those older students who are so far behind and don't have a lot of time left, in school.
Yeah, and that was really one of our driving forces with Link It, because you're right. You get an iReady report back, 3 grade levels below. That is a tremendous amount of work to catch up. So Link It changes that game, because let's say I'm going into Algebra 2. I take the Link It benchmark at the beginning of the year. It's only on the Algebra 2 standards. So now that teacher has a report of, okay, here's what we need to get through this year. We're going to build on as much as we can from the prior years, because that's how it's all going to connect together. But now here is my roadmap, that is just more to the point of specifically what I need as a student. And then we can look at that as the broader spectrum of the class. But now we can really look at our programming by standard, instead of saying, okay, a few grade levels below.
Okay, I have one other question, actually. So when you, with those reports, do you know, like, individually a particular student, like again, I'll use Faith. You could say, like, Faith Phillips is 3 levels below where she should be. So at what point at all do you loop in the parent or guardian to make sure that they're aware that their child is so far behind, and see what they might be able to do to assist? Because I know not everybody looks at Genesis, unlike me, who looks at it every day. But a lot of parents don't look at it, they're not familiar with it, so they may not really know that their child is that significantly behind. So I'm wondering, at what point do you decide, like, that's a best practice to loop in the parent or their guardian to kind of help them on the back end?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that always needs to be part of that process. If I was the teacher kind of looking at this initial data, this is looking at all of Algebra 1. So it's, okay, we took this at the end of September. Lower scores, not a tremendous red flag. But when they take that mid-year, that winter Link It benchmark, and now we should be seeing areas of growth, especially in the areas that have already been covered within the class. That's where, that connection at home, because this is material we've covered. We can do some extra support, but, just wanted to communicate that we're still seeing, some concerns in areas that we have covered in class.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Dr. Sainer.
Thank you for the presentation. I was really happy to see the former multilingual learners, students, were exceeding state averages. I know we're here to talk about ELA and math and science, but I think that shows that our programming for those students is working. As a board member, Ms. Phillips kind of addressed this from the parents, right? How are the parents accessing this information? From a board perspective, right, with our role being oversight of the entire district, I have some questions about how we should be, or the data available to us as we move through this year, to make sure that the many interventions that you've shown us are actually working. And so Will there be, you mentioned the mid-year iReady report. Will we, and I guess this is really to Dr. McLaughlin, but will we have access to that? Because I think it's important as a board that we're seeing, you know, all of these interventions sound great. They sound exactly what I would want to see, exactly what I would suggest as an educator, more than I would suggest as an educator, but I feel like we can't wait until October next year to see that they worked or they didn't work. So I guess I'm requesting that we see the mid-year iReady data to be able to compare. And some questions that I would, you know, some data that you didn't present tonight, which was possibly not appropriate, is you mentioned that the average student in Dover made more than a grade level improvement over the last school year. I would actually like to see the percentage of students that made more than a grade level, the percentage of students that made one grade level, and the percentage of students who made less than a grade level improvement, to kind of tease that out a little bit, because the students that are making, as Ms. Phillips alluded to, the students who are making less than a year's improvement, they're just falling farther behind. They are behind, and they're falling even farther behind. So I would ask that we revisit this whole topic whenever that mid-year diagnostic data is available. This is a foundational responsibility of our board, and we need to, I think we need more frequent check-ins regarding this data. But thank you for your presentation.
1 second, Mr. Miller. Dr. McLaughlin, are you able to
Oh,
give
yeah,
us an
we're
answer?
happy to share that data.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Okay, so Lincoln is new, but iReady, how many years of data do we have at this time?
So we have, I'll say, 2 official years. So we actually have 3 years worth of data. The first year was our pilot year. So the reason we don't bring that necessarily into the equation is because we launched that diagnostic a little bit later to consider it like a beginning of the year benchmark, just because it was our first year. So I would say we have 2 official years in the books with iReady.
So at what point do you think we could be more predictive of the student achievement going forward? Do we need more data to be able to do that, or do you think we're able to do that this year?
So iReady actually gives us an NJSLA predictor, and it was within a few percentage points for each school. So we do get that information. The beginning of the year is always, it's usually the mid-year that really kind of tells that story and really paints that picture for us, but it does give us that ability within the program.
Can I just add to that too? Mr. Miller, we also are experiencing new standards being released. I just shared that with Mr. Carl. There's webinars going on for new standards. So when the state releases new standards, that prompts us to write new curriculum, and that should also prompt them to write a new test. Now, whether they do that or not, I don't know, but that's what should be happening. So even though we do have that data internally, it's a moving target because your standards are going to be changing a little bit.
So the 80% passing of the algebra in the middle school, so that's algebra 1 in the middle school?
Yes.
So, but when they go to the high school, they're not doing algebra 1 anymore. So
No, they go to geometry as a ninth grader.
So the algebra scores theoretically won't get better when they move to the high school because they're not taking algebra.
Yeah, that cohort of students will move into geometry their ninth grade year.
Okay. And so one of the other things I'd like to be able to see is at the time that the middle school students are going to the high school, we have a jump off of students that go off to other programs. So it would be interesting to see, based on iReady results, the level of students that are leaving the district going elsewhere. And the reason why I say that is that, you know, I would like for us to be able to find ways to keep them in district if we have programs that would entice them to stay. I understand people go for different reasons, programs that we can't provide. But I've heard from parents that they were looking for something more, like the academies and things that we used to have that we just need to market some of the things I think we have to try to keep some of the students in. Because that's my concern, is that we do really well with them and they get to the middle school and then they leave, and then our data is not predictive now at the high school, and we're in the same boat over and over again. just a comment, that's all. Thank you very much
Yeah,
for your
thank you.
presentation.
Dr. Sainer.
I just had a question for Ms. Rigliano. Which standards are new?
They're not new yet, but they're
But-
discussing new language arts standards, and I don't know if math was in
And
that.
math,
and
yeah.
math,
New math
yeah.
and language arts.
Which
Okay.
were released not too long ago.
Yes.
So K to 8, math and ELA?
K to 12.
K to
Wow.
12.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
my understanding is K to 8, in terms of the language arts, our supervisor is confident and positive of the program aligning with the new standards. The high school courses, which we have not redone in a number of years, we'll need to spend more time this summer coming up looking at them. The other thing I wanted to mention, we're talking a lot about Algebra 1 and we're celebrating that score because it's a score worth celebrating. But that does not mean that we're resting on our laurels. So Mr. Carl and I and Ms. Shaw, our new math supervisor, are going to look at the program that we've been using in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry, which is Agile Mind. We want to make sure that it's still meeting the needs of our students and teachers. We've had some teacher feedback on that program. It may be the one that we choose to stick with. It may not be. But it's, I just don't want people to think that, oh, we scored this great score in algebra and we're just leaving that alone. No, it's still on the line to be looked at and to be reviewed.
Ms. Acevedo.
Thank you for that presentation. Can you help me understand what the difference is between Linkit and iReady, please?
Yeah, so Linkit, for the most part, is our data warehouse. So any data within the district is now stored in there, which gives us the ability to access that information and kind of look at things side by side. At the high school level, we're also incorporating the Linkit benchmark assessments. So those are currently in Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, English 1, 2, and 3, and then Chemistry, Biology, and Physics. So all of those programs are taking a beginning, a middle, and an end of year benchmark so that we'll be able to see that data, look for that growth, beginning to middle, beginning to end. So we're using that at the high school. That will also expand. We're going to be building benchmarks for other courses throughout this year. So next year there will be even more courses on the list for in-district benchmark assessments.
Thank you. I have another question. In regards to the algebra in middle school, how do we identify students who are enrolled in that algebra class? Do we handpick like the students who have shown great aptitude for math, or do we give them an assessment and so forth?
Yeah, so that was part of the work in kind of, revamping that middle school algebra program. There is a matrix that we utilize that has a combination of teacher input. So the teachers can kind of share what they're seeing in the classroom. We look at iReady data, both overall and their specific algebra domain. And then we also have an algebra readiness assessment that they take through iReady. So all of those factors together work into the matrix. And then that score, helps us select the students who would most benefit from that accelerated math course.
I'm not sure if you can give me this information, but how many students are enrolled in that algebra? Is it just one section of algebra?
No, we have about 60 students in 3 sections I would say about 65 students in 3 sections of Algebra 1 at the middle school.
All right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Robles.
So thank you again for the presentation. I have a couple things. First, I'm going to give thanks and props to the math teachers. I know they do a lot of hard work. I like math. My daughter does not like math. So it's been a struggle for her in 7th grade. She's now in 8th grade, and fortunately she's liking a little bit more. But I'm just curious. I know you just explained a little bit now, but how does the math from 7th to 8th grade, and now you just mentioned that the 8th grade algebra group is specifically chosen for algebra. Like they're not being put in there unless they show, as you said, some of those qualifying factors. But how does that prepare the non-algebra ones for when they get into high school? What is helping them to get ready for what's going to come in high school? Because I think in high school, you don't have a choice. You just get put into a certain math regardless, right?
Yeah, so, the students, they leave 6th grade, they work through, the 7th and 8th grade standards, and then that would lead them directly into 9th grade to start Algebra 1. The students who are in 7th grade who end up being selected for the Algebra 1 program, they technically are not working through the 8th grade standards in a full year program. It becomes more of an accelerated where the 8th grade standards are connected to the Algebra 1, so it's a much faster paced program. But the students who are still going through our 7th and 8th grade, as Mr. Pandolfo said, the New Jersey state standards are rigorous, and they have to work through all of the 7th grade ones, all of the 8th grade, so they are ready for that 9th grade Algebra 1 program.
So once they enter high school, they're going into algebra if they didn't have some of that already in 8th grade.
Yep, so 8th grade, if they're in 8th grade math, they're just working through the New Jersey 8th grade standards, which are very heavily, pre-algebra based, which launches them directly into that 9th grade, kickstarts that algebra year.
Do we have anything that shows the general math for 8th grade outside of the algebra group? Is that something that you showed here in the graph?
Yes, yeah, I believe that was in one of them.
Okay, maybe I missed that. And then I'm just curious about the former ELL. When you explain that that's higher than the state average, that's for, I don't know if that was for middle school only or if that was, I don't think I've jotted down where that group.
That was for the entire district. It was about 11 or 12% of the students that actually took the test. I believe the number was about 130.
Okay. Yeah, I'm wondering if there's anything that we could learn from those experiences and those students that is helping them to significantly score higher than the rest, because I think that's a great outcome.
Can I just clarify, though? I want to make sure, Pat, on that slide, we're comparing students that are multilingual learners with other students that are multilingual learners in the state?
No, it's everybody in the state. It's the state averages. They're above the state average.
Okay.
Both in both English language arts and in math.
Okay.
And one last recommendation, just for that one slide that has that 80%. I think it was some colors. I'm not good with colors, but I think it was shaded gray. The box for the 80. Maybe a lighter color would be good.
That was like slide 3 or 4. That one I was talking about.
A lighter color would be good. Maybe like a green, make it stand out a little better. That was great. Excited for that. Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
I just wanted to clarify. In order to graduate, you have to pass Algebra 1, correct?
Yes, yeah, Algebra 1 geometry and Algebra 2.
Okay, so the middle school students, were they taking the Algebra 1 test and they passed that in 8th grade?
Yeah, so if they're if they're sitting in Algebra 1 in middle school, they take the Algebra 1 NJSLA.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it was the same thing. So that meant that 80% already met that requirement for graduation.
Yes, yeah, they hit and that's one of the, in the second pathway, that Algebra 1 NJSLA, so they would have met that requirement, yes.
Are there any other comments or questions from the board? Ms. Acevedo.
Just quickly, all the 65 students who are taking Algebra 1, do they have the same teacher?
Yes, they do.
Well, kudos to that teacher.
Yes.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board? No? I will end us off with some comments and a final question. Year after year, presentation after presentation, we are confronted with test results that are not the greatest. Year after year, presentation after presentation, we are assured of intervention strategies and told the results will improve. Clearly, something is not working. Test scores are not improving, and internal data reflects slow, minimal improvement. We have a budget that has nearly doubled in the last 5 to 6 years, and we have approved most recommendations by the administration. So my question is, where do we as a board need to invest, whether that be financially or policy-wise, to positively impact student achievement? And I don't know if Dr. McLaughlin wants to take that or one of our presenters.
Well, I think it's a really big question. We know that we have many students who come to us challenged. When we look at the amount of students who on our formative assessment test 3 grade levels below, 2 grade levels below, those are big numbers. And it is a hard journey for any student at any level to make a year's worth of progress, but to work with students to make a year plus worth of progress is extremely challenging. I think the growth data, and we remark on that a lot, and it's not because we're hanging our hat on it, it's because that's the data that's most relevant to our students. Students are not going to go from 3 grade levels below and hit a grade level target where we see the NJSLA change. And I was a big fan of the SGP scores. I don't know that everybody is in the state, but I am, because I felt that it measured what's truly important, and that is what the individual student is, how they are growing. I think we will continue to see on these one-time yearly assessments data that we wish was different, but I think that what we are seeing in terms of growth is critically important. Our students, we talked about this, we talked about it last month in graduation. Many of them, and I think an increasing amount of them, and we'll continue to present this data, are here for a short time. And so what we've invested in pre-K through 12 really is based on the idea that a student will progress with us from grade to grade, or they'll be in a similar district where they're progressing grade to grade, where we can either be the next on the relay line, or that district can be the next on the relay line from us. But we know that the population we're servicing right now increasingly does not fit that image. And what we are doing is investing in interventions at every single grade level, including pre-K, because pre-K is a critical piece to get kids off to a good jump start for success. The research is clear that you see results in 3rd grade, so we're hoping that the majority of our pre-K students, that they will be in the district by the time that they're grade, and we see those results. We've invested in basic skills instruction. We've invested in Norton-Gillingham instruction for non-readers. We've invested in reading specialists and in new math programs. I do think that's where we see the progress difference for students, but I think it's a really it would be it wouldn't be authentic for me or any of our team to provide a prediction on what we're going to see on the NJSLA. And I do, because I'm a part of multiple roundtables with superintendents from throughout the states, many of whom do not have populations that face the challenges that our population have, who are railing about the NJSLA because they are seeing results that they have not seen before. That being the case, and it's not productive to be negative about the state assessment, it's just has to be stated that there are problems at that level. So, but whether or not it's the state assessment or it's our own data, we know that our students many times are multiple grade levels below. I neglected to mention, the 2 biggest intervention programs in our district, which is the bilingual ESL program, and which is growing. It's grown since the beginning of this year, 60 students. And so we're seeing large amount of students in that program and large amount of students in our special ed program, and both of those are ones that we're dedicated to growing and helping students. So the best that we can do is to meet our students where they are, provide the right interventions, work towards growth, measure the growth, and continue to report that, and look for successes within the individual student and within the cohorts that we can identify, so that we can get our hands around the best way to measure whether or not this investment, and believe me, we are tremendously grateful to have such a supportive board who's always looking to see what the answers are for students, but we also know that there's an accountability piece of that.
Can I just add to that too? And I'm just going to make a comment. I'll be shorter than Dr. McLaughlin. To our teachers that are listening and watching, I know that this type of presentation can cause a lot of anxiety. Keep your heads up, keep your focus. We are here for you. You know what to do. Don't doubt yourself.
Thank you. As before we head into our next presentation, I think it's important to emphasize that as we begin to create our next budget, I think it is the expectation that we will make meaningful budgetary investments in positions and programs that will positively impact student achievement, meaning that I honestly do not want to see any more administrative positions. And then we can move on to the next
Excuse me.
presentation.
May I?
Mr. Robles?
I'd just like to say, as a parent and as a board member, I feel encouraged. My daughter being an example of some of the work that this work has paid off. I remember when she scored on the state level, 7th grade, I wasn't happy with some of the scores. And I've seen significant improvement with her scores that I just received for 8th grade. And I wasn't expecting that. And she tells me every day she's frustrated with math. And I try to deal with that. And I try to understand for her. So I think, you know, it's important for us to understand as parents that even if a child doesn't score what we would like them to be, if we are seeing growth, if we're seeing the staff is invested the way that you guys are portraying, and I know I've seen it, I think we're in the right trajectory. And I think it's unrealistic for anybody to expect that we're going to go from 20s and 30% to 50 to 60 in a year or 2 years or 3 years. So I'm just glad that, you know, the presentation that you're showing here, I can attest that it's working for my daughter, and I know she can attest for the same for the students that are riding along with her. So thank you to all the staff. I know the math teachers get a bad rap from my daughter, but they're doing a great job, and I'm grateful for the work that they're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Robles. Ms. Grisales?
I want to ditto that. I also have seen personally, and I think Ms. Phillips mentioned how do parents know these test scores. We get NJSLA reports to our home, so we can see it, and there is a lot of resources out there to understand, but I have also seen personally, and have the same as you, Mr. Robles, get a bad rep for the math teacher from my kid, and I know they do a great job in trying, right, and as well as English. I also want to comment that and I think, Dr. McLaughlin, I know that you can't speak in regards, and I know you try to be very good in not speaking ill of the standardized testing, right, for our state. I can. I think that it is something that does not match our demographic, and we can't really fit a round right peg into a square hole. And I think that's what our data shows for most, right? We have a migrant community, strong. You see it in the multilingual results for math across the district. The education in math in other countries, even if they don't know the language, are higher than those who are here and know the language. So that is proof of the diversity and great strength that we have that cannot be shown in these statistics, because we are measuring two different things. We are not measuring the same thing. We are not measuring what our Dover students and staff do. We don't fit into this standard. I just wanted to kind of make sure that we are understanding that.
Thank you, Ms. Grisales. Are there any other comments? We'll move on to our next presentation.
Okay, in introducing the next presentation, which will revolve around the possibility of rental space in the Newberry building on Blackwell Street, I just want to again reiterate that we have a space issue. I know that's not new news to anyone, but just to revisit where we are in terms of space. The August 30th, 2022 correspondence from the Department of Education in regards to our long-range facility plan indicated the following capacities for Dover School District. At the elementary level, 910.79 students. At the middle school level, 510.31 students. And at the high school level, 790.5 students. This correspondence clearly indicated that the district was projected to have inadequate grade capacity for all grade groups. Based on the end of September 2023 enrollment report, enrollments for these grade groupings are as follows. So again, the capacity that the state told us for elementary was 910.79. We have 1,530 students at the end of September. The capacity for middle school was 510.31. We have 485. We are within the capacity in the 7th and 8th grade level. And Dover High School, the state told us we have 790.5 capacity. We, at the end of September, had 1,174 students. So tonight's presentation doesn't address the total issue of space, but it addresses the high school portion based on the space opportunities that are available, both on a facility basis within our community and that are within our current operating budget, for example, to rent. Until such time as a more permanent solution presents itself, the district will continue to seek solutions. I do want to indicate that our efforts, even in the coming year, are not limited to a rental at Newberry if the board decides that's the direction they want to go in. We're also pursuing, for example, the opportunity for a significant amount of seniors who might be able to complete their senior year on college campus. In our new partnership with William Patterson, there's promise there as well, which would provide a great opportunity for our students to be in a college environment, but it would also provide space here at the high school. So that being said, I would like to introduce our architect and his team. Pete, would you come forward to the microphone? And he will begin by outlining some aspects of the Newberry building. Pete Camposano from USA Architects. And then we will segue into the vision for how we would utilize this space.
Thank you, Doctor. Get over here. Again, Pete Camposano from USA Architects. With me is Mr. Michael Bryson. And this is really a two-part act. This is a very brief overview for the board and for the public about the facility under consideration, and then I think the more significant point or part is going to come after us. This is a fairly brief presentation that I'd like to give you about the facility, where it is, what it is, and some of the things that we saw, and present it to you, the board, for consideration. Beautiful. So it is at the corner of North Sussex and Blackwell. It is known as the Newberry building. It is on the historic registrar. It is or was home to a former college that is no longer there. It is presently empty. We like that for the fact that it was, the upper two floors were an educational use prior to them leaving the site. So in proximity to Dover High School, and the next presentation will go into this more, but the right picture shows Dover High School at the top, that red circle, and it shows the Newberry building at the bottom in that red circle. It's about approximately 1.5, 1.6 miles apart in terms of traveling distance, about a 5-minute to 10-minute drive. A closer view of the site, you see West Blackwell at the bottom, North Sussex and Warren straddling the two sides, and then the Bassett Highway at the rear. That gold stripe would be the proposed bus drop-off or pickup area. The students would be picked up or dropped off there, walk around the corner with the main entrance right in the middle of North Sussex Street. And as I said, it is a 3-story building. The first floor, mostly just the entrance, the stairs to the upper levels, the main office, counselors' offices, potentially the nurse's office. If we go to the next slide. So the front part that faces West Blackwell would be partitioned off, is partitioned off. There is no access between what you see in white, which would be retail, and what you see in the back, which is where the main entrance would be, the stairs to the 2nd and 3rd floors, the main office, nurse's office, counselor's offices, as I stated before. Next. 2nd floor, as you walk up the stairs, there's about 6 or 7 general classrooms ranging in area from 600 to well over 1,000 square feet in area. A central corridor, and the green areas would be those student support spaces, offices, small group rooms, or other student support spaces that would support the general classrooms. The third floor, similar in terms of circulation. Again, general classrooms, but you'll notice the bottom left, there is a cafeteria. That was the existing cafeteria, and we would continue to utilize that and recommend to utilize that, and would be going over or looking at the logistics on how that would work. While I'm on this slide, you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner, there's a pink stair. In terms of circulation, it was something that we talked with the existing owner about. That's not there now. We recommended a second means of egress that's internal. Right now, presently, Newberry has an exterior fire escape, and we felt quite strongly that we would like to, if you embark on this as a condition, to get rid of the exterior fire escape and go with an interior stair. They've agreed with me about that, and we're presenting it to you, but I think that was a nice plus that we got approved. In terms of just views, the exterior view that you can see, that's North Sussex, and actually you can see the exterior fire escape that would be eliminated if you decide to move into the facility. And the right picture shows the front entrance that would be the main student entrance. Just in terms of what the classrooms look like, I took some photographs of the typical classrooms, 9-foot ceilings, daylight, windows, tile floors. It would be outfitted with any type of data or technology as the district sees fit as we embark on moving this forward. As part of this process, we met with local officials, building, fire, planning, and toured it with them and talked about the pros and cons. And it was actually one of those meetings that the exterior fire escape came up, and we had a positive conversation with the owner about it. If you do decide to move forward, we're not going to move in tomorrow. This will be planned on projecting for September of ¡24. It gives you enough time, but we do have several approvals that we would need to be achieved, one of which is certainly the building department. The building department would require what is called a change in use, because we're going from, let's say, a college which is above the 12th grade to a K-12, below the 12th grade use. There are certain items within the code that we would submit to the local building department to prove out that the facility is safe and up to code. We would need to go before your local planning board and talk to them and have a review with them. I'm sure there are items such as traffic or anything that they may very well be interested in. I would recommend, and the district is looking at, again, if you proceed with a traffic engineer. And actually that traffic engineer was very nice enough to come tonight, and she is listening to anything that may come out of this in terms of questions. This is her first day. She really doesn't know too much, but at least she's here to listen, not to answer any questions. And the other component, we may or may not be involved with the historical commission. That may be the owner involved with the historical commission, because this is an historic building and something that we would need to review locally with your local officials. And last but certainly not least, the Department of Education. The Department of Education is a rigorous approval where we would vet out and prove out that the facility is educationally adequate for the students that you propose to see fit to put into this proposed facility. And finally, last picture. I hate to end on this slide, but just some of the facilities, the toilet facilities, they're new, they're up to code. It's a clean facility, some of the hallways and the like. And that's our brief presentation on the actual facility, and I will turn it over, Doc, back to you for anything more that you need from us. Thank you.
Thank you. And what we're going to do is have the presentation in its entirety with our
Yes.
high school team next, and then certainly both our architects and the high school team would be available for any questions following. With that being said, I would like to invite Mr. Hicks, Mr. Nunez, and Mr. Saulnier. We had a slightly larger committee actually who looked at how this facility would be utilized, and from that committee, these are our three presenters. So I turn it over to Mr. Nunez to get us started.
I'm a little shorter, so I have to bring the microphone down a little bit. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to present to you our introduction to Newberry, our vision for this particular building and its use. So I want to start by looking at the current status of Dover High School space. Currently, the enrollment is 1,183. That is of today. When we checked our Genesis, that is the total number of students currently enrolled in the high school. There are 53 total classrooms at the high school, 49 of which are in Dover High School proper, meaning inside this building that we're in today, and 4 modular classrooms in trailers. As it stands right now, with that number of total classrooms, we have an issue with space. We have no rooms available during the bookends of our day, period 1 and period 9, meaning there's every single classroom that is in the building at that time is being utilized, including the trailers. There are less than 4 rooms in the other non-lunch periods, which are 2, 3, 4, and 8. Why is that important? If we have emergency situations or needs where we might have to relocate classes due to a number of reasons, we have no space to do so. We would normally have to relocate them in places such as the cafeteria or the media center or the auditorium, depending on the size, and it does not make the most optimal situation. If we look at optimal class size, it's about 22. If we're looking at to really provide our students with the most optimal learning space, 22 is the number that research tells us. Dover High School would need 54 classrooms each period, again, with the exception of the lunch periods, because 1/3 of our students are at lunch at that time. As of today, 70 classes currently have 26 or more students in them. Just to give you some perspective, last year, the entire year, 78 classes had 26 or more. If you look at an optimal classroom environment, and 22 is that number, as of today, 155 classrooms have more than 22 students in them. So what are the needs and goals with the Newberry building? Obviously, we want to increase space and make space available at Dover High School. So at the end again, as I had mentioned previously, 22-23, end of school year, 78 classes had 27 or more students in them. So teachers don't have adequate space to prepare for their lessons and to have collaboration opportunities with their colleagues. Normally, they prepare in locations such as the media center, the cafeteria, or those lobby tables which are right outside this room. Not being able to provide privacy or confidentiality that might be needed when preparing for involving themselves in things like a professional learning community. So we need to increase space, and Newberry provides us that opportunity to do so. It also allows us to expand programming at DHS. So if we are able to reduce the number or able to increase the number of available rooms here, we are also then able to increase the number of available programs for our students, such as new AP courses, new dual enrollment courses, and such. And a wonderful byproduct of this is we are able to help increase the graduation rate. By utilizing the Newberry building, it provides us an opportunity to provide alternative programming for students to increase that graduation rate for students who would have historically dropped out. And we'll show you what that looks like in a moment.
So how does Newberry help this situation? In the 24-25 school year, we expect that we will start with 100 students at Newberry. The reason that we are starting with that number when we know that the capacity is 200 or 200 plus based on Pete's presentation and information that he's provided is we are looking at existing programs and existing students. We want to take what we already have and bring it to Newberry so that then there are opportunities to evaluate and to grow as we move in the future. Those 100 students, when we're working on our master schedule, would allow us to remove 4 classes per period. And if you're looking at my numbers up there, period 5 is not there because I've grouped all of those students into that lunch period. So for the remaining 8 periods, each one of them would have 4 less sections or 4 less classes running or 4 empty classrooms for a total of 32 throughout the day. That is significant in addressing preparation time for teachers, where they can do it, what courses could be there. We've talked about additional AP courses, additional dual enrollment courses. It allows us for when an emergency or heat or air condition has issues in the building to be able to move students to those open classrooms. It also removes the need for students to be in the trailers for their PE classes, which means if any of you have walked outside on that nice, sleety, rainy day, it's a very fun walk. Even though it's short, it's a walk that we can avoid with our students. So we looked at approximately 8 different programs for Newberry. Bless you. We wanted to understand what the needs of the community was, what the needs of our students, and who would benefit from this program the most. We looked at students who are half-day program with Morris County Vocational School, and we talked through the pros and cons, as well as several others, and these were the 3 specific programs that we are starting with. At this time, we have, let me get to the right slide, I'm sorry, 78 students who would have qualified as over age and under credit. Now, what does that mean? Most students enter Dover High School at either 13 or 14 years old for 9th grade. By the time they are 15, going into 10th grade, they will have earned 30 credits. 16, going into 11th grade, they will have earned 60 credits. 17, they will be going into 12th grade, and they will have 90 credits. A student who comes to us at the age of 16 with 0 credits is 2 years behind. They are then placed in 9th grade classes and are trying to catch up because, as we know, they will age out when they turn 19 and then have to start a new school year beyond that. If we look at the 46 students of Newberry was open this year, these 46 students are 2 years or more behind, meaning they are missing at least 60 credits. Most of these students will age out before earning their high school diploma at 20. This is a direct reflection of what was talked about at last month's board meeting. These students typically are here for approximately 2 years, and we've seen that time and time and time again. 42 of these 46, and I will repeat that, 42 of these 46 students will graduate in a 2-year period of time at Newberry. Now, there's very little that I can give you from this podium that has a discernible number that will affect our graduation rate. This is one of them, because those are 42 individuals. Many of those students have interrupted formal education. They may have only gone to school till 4th or 5th or 6th grade in the country before they came here. This gives us additional opportunities, thanks to the foundational courses that were approved by this board, where they can gain those skills and those fundamental skills to be able to catch up. They will also have the opportunity to gain life skills, career-based skills, because we know they will be in the workforce. And through option 2, which Mr. Nunez will talk about in a moment, they are able to gain credit towards a high school diploma for life experience. This building and programming allows us to truly look at individual students and meet their needs. One last point on that before we move on. A recent study shows that on an annual basis, students with a high school diploma earn $9,620 more per year because of that high school diploma. If you are coming out of high school at 18, you have many, many years of that extra $10,000 of earning potential. The second program we looked at is our CTE graphic design program, which is currently housed in one of our 300 wing classrooms. This room has excellent technology in it, but is not set up as a professional shop. The students are gaining great skills and having excellent experiences in that classroom. But Newberry gives us the opportunity for these 30 to 35 students to have a professional, stimulated design graphic studio. By having that opportunity, they are also getting the ability to have a school-based enterprise program. That means that they can involve the community in taking on projects, gaining extra life skills and career skills by working with local businesses and providing product back. That school-based enterprise is recognized by the Department of Education in New Jersey as one of the pieces of option 2 and work-based learning, as well as Perkins grant that does come out on a yearly basis. We will be able to take that and then have internships because of the proximity to downtown. So local businesses will be able to come in, work with our students. Also, as part of that school-based enterprise, they will gain accounting skills, they will gain marketing skills, and the other financial skills that are necessary to run a small business. So our CTE program, while the main focus is graphic design, has much more touch points on real life, real world-based skills. The final group that we looked at was to get a Dover high school diploma, you are required to earn 140 credits. With a 9-period day, where students take lunch, one of them, you are typically earning 40 credits in each year, which means when you enter your senior year, most students, as you can see, 162 of our 250, only need 4 courses to graduate to get to the 140. As you're aware, physical education and English are requirements all 4 years. Those are 2 of the 4 courses. For the most part, of those 162, all but 12 had elective courses for their other 2 courses. They all have full schedules at Dover High School, meaning they only need 4, but they are taking 8 courses. Now, even though there's 162 that are on that board, students who are looking at 2-year, 4-year, or continuing education most likely would not go down this road and look to have this. However, one student from last year comes to mind. He would come to Dover High School at 7:45 every morning, stay here until 2:40, leave here, go to his first job at 3 o'clock, work from 3 o'clock until 11 o'clock every night. Then he'd have dinner. Then he would go to his second job at midnight and work until 6 a.m. He would then try and get here on a daily basis at 7:45. I can't even imagine that. This is a program for him. We have many students who are in that situation.
So I wanted to give the audience an option 2 overview. And we had spoken about option 2 in curriculum committee. And wanted to demonstrate how option 2 will help us make this possible. What is option 2? So option 2 is an assets-based approach to provide students alternative opportunities to earn credit towards graduation, and it is an alternative to traditional high school courses. So if you think of traditional high school course, you spend 42 minutes in a classroom for 180 days, you earn credit with an acceptable grade point average. Knowing that the state has a 120 credit requirement, it also states that those 120 credits may be met through partial program with a completion of a range of experiences that enable students to pursue individualized learning opportunities. That's what option 2 is. Option 2 must include a connection to state standards based upon instructional objectives, and that's a very important piece, the standards-based instruction. It must have a method for assessing how state standards were met and a standard process for awarding credits towards graduation requirements. There is no official approval that we must obtain from the State Department of Education. However, districts must have a board-approved policy, which is on tonight's agenda. So how will option 2 help us? It's the cornerstone of what we're looking at for those students to accelerate their credit. So we're looking at the students particularly who are over age and undercredited. It provides a pathway to double student credit attainment in half the time. It allows students to earn credit for present and past experiences, and life experience, if aligned to standards, can be used as well to earn that credit. And you can fulfill core graduation requirements such as English, math, or science, as well as any elective credits that we may have. There we go. So I want you to meet Fernando. Now, Fernando is a fictional individual. We did not pull him from our records. Okay. Fernando is 17 years old, and he recently migrated to the United States from Guatemala. He has no record of secondary school education, and he is enrolled in Dover High School with 0 credits and is considered a 9th grader. So as Mr. Hicks had pointed out, by the time students are 17, they come to 12th grade earning 90 credits at that time. In Fernando's situation, there is minimal support at home due to income needs, single parent who works multiple jobs to make ends meet. His formal education has been interrupted. Say compulsory education normally in countries such as Guatemala go to up to the 6th grade. And he also works to help support his family and watch his 2 younger siblings. So due to age constraints, Fernando needs to complete 4 years of high school in 3 in order for him to attain his requirements and reach his credit total before he ages out of 20. So what, as a school district, what can we do? So how can he earn credit? As we said, option 2 would be a good example, and here's an example of how a student could earn credit in Fernando's situation. So Fernando comes in with 0 credit, and here's an example. Fernando comes from a family of musicians, so he knows how to play the guitar. And he's been playing with a family musical group for several years. What we can do is we can take a look based on our conversations with Fernando, and we can take a look at his experience, and we can correlate that experience to a mastery of visual and performing arts standards, which can then earn him credit and therefore allow him to gain his visual and performing art requirement, which is 1 year on the high school level. So we're taking the experience that he has as a musician and being able to note that the standards. If you take a look at visual and performing arts standards, for example, one of those is performance, 1.3. That standard is something that he obviously does regularly and can show mastery because he performs on a regular basis. We can document that and correlate that to a meeting of the standards. Okay, he will have fulfilled that standard. That's the example. This can also apply to other subjects such as math, science, or personal and financial literacy, all of which are graduation requirements. So that's an example of how option 2 would work for Fernando in this situation. It's just one of many. I'll pass it off to Mr. Saulnier.
Thank you, Mr. Nunez. Good evening, everyone. Mike Saulnier, Supervisor of Guidance. Let me say once again, thank you, all of you, for allowing us to make our presentation this evening. My contribution is just a brief overview of the high school master scheduling process in hopes that it will both illustrate the way in which class sizes and class usage may be alleviated if we are to move forward with the Newberry project, as well as provide some reassurance that our master scheduling process is methodical and a year-long endeavor that's done in collaboration and teamwork, and one in which we avail ourselves of every best practice and technological resource that we have access to. So one thing when it comes to high school master scheduling is that we have to think in terms of sections instead of classes. It's very much a departure from an elementary school philosophy where a teacher has his or her class for most of the day, and those children are taken out for specials, for phys ed, and for lunch. In high school, for instance, we have at DHS, and I apologize if I'm telling everybody things that you know all too well. We have a 9-period day. Each class is 42 minutes. Our teachers, any full-time teacher, typically has 5 classes on their schedule daily. Each of those classes is considered a section. For instance, a high school math teacher might teach 3 sections of Algebra 1 and 2 sections of Algebra 2. So that would be a full teaching schedule for each of our teachers. Now, the number of sections per class is determined by the number of requests from all the students in the building. So every student, we encourage them, not only encourage them, but require them to have 8 requests for the following school year. 8 requests because the 9th period, of course, is their lunch period. 1 period will be for lunch. We plan and build a master schedule by placing these sections where they work best in the 9-period day. And to do that, once again, in a team format, we monitor all of our constraints. We know, for instance, that our CTE class has to be certain periods of the day because we have professors from CCM that are coming, and we're concerned with those constraints. We know that our ceramics classes have to be taught towards the end of the day back to back because of the requirements with the kiln, how long it takes for the kiln to heat up, how long it takes for it to cool back down before the classroom can be used again safely for other students. So we consider those constraints, and we hand place specific courses like that, and then we use our Genesis student data system, which has very powerful algorithms to demonstrate and show us where most of our classes need to be placed in order for all of our students to get the most advantageous schedules. Just to illustrate that, up top of this slide is what we call our tally report for environmental science. This is an actual snapshot of a class that we built this year into our master schedule. We get a tally report like this for every single course. The number to concern yourselves with here is the total, okay? Obviously a 5-credit course, but we had a total of 52 requests, mostly from 11th and 12th graders for environmental science, which is a somewhat standard 3rd-year lab inquiry-based science class taken by 11th and 12th graders to satisfy their 3rd-year science requirement. So those 52 requests resulted in 3 sections that we were required to build. All right, you can see the towards the right of the tally report is the class size. Now we have that number set at 24 because that is the recommended optimal maximum for a lab science presented by the state and by OSHA. So if 8 of those students attended Newberry, we would need 2 sections and still have room for additional students in each section. So there's no guarantee that everybody would be in the same science class, but just using this one course, I think you can see that by reducing those requests and having those students scheduled in a different location, we would need a room one less period that would then alleviate class size and the need for physical space. And that is how the Newberry programming stands to increase our room availability and alleviate class sizes. And that's it for my portion, and I'll be around later, of course, to answer any questions. And I'm turning back over to Mr. Nunez.
Thank you, Mr. Saulnier. So let's take a look at the effects on Dover High School. So our primary goal, obviously, is to open up space in the school by reducing the number of students in the building at any given time. We reduce sections at the high school. We then have more available classroom spaces. It alleviates overcrowding of classrooms and the use of trailers for classroom space. Again, trying to, as best as possible, to hit that optimum number for our students. With more classrooms, we can then begin to offer more opportunities for our students because we have a place to put them and put those classes. We provide teachers with more areas for collaboration, lesson planning, etc., and it allows us flexibility to prepare for any emergency situation which may arise, okay? Increases in enrollment and any future mandates that may come from the state of New Jersey. How can Fernando benefit as a result of this? It will provide him the opportunity to graduate with a high school diploma, thus increasing our graduation rate. Provide him with more opportunities to expand his educational options and provide more outlets for electives for him to pursue. He can take a dual enrollment course or even take an advanced course if he so desires and his grades are acceptable. And as a multilingual learner, he can continue his education and realize the dream of success at Dover High School, where many students in his situation might have to drop out.
So we've mentioned credit acceleration. Here is what Fernando's 2-year plan to a high school diploma is. Now, one thing that I want to point out, and I think a question that very well may come, is how can you do 2 courses in the course of 10 months for a school year? This is where option 2 comes into play. It is standard base achievement and demonstration of proficiency, not seat time. So this was a published item in 2021 by the Department of Education for newcomers who are classified as ESL students or SLIFE students who had formal education interrupted. So student who is, Fernando, who is in period 1 that is doing ESL 1 and ESL 2, is demonstrating his knowledge and proficiency of the standards that would be expected in ESL 1. And as he has demonstrated that, he is then moving on to ESL 2 standards. So by the end of the school year, if he has demonstrated proficiency in the ESL 1 standards and ESL 2 standards that are in the Dover High School curriculum, he would earn 10 credits. This also applies to his 2 history courses the next period, biology, and one reason why we looked at biology as a standalone is because that allows the student for the hands-on time with labs. This is not a program of just taking every single period and condensing it down for everything being 10 credits. This would be specific to him based on the knowledge that we have. As you can see, right underneath period 9 on the left-hand side is option 2 for music. Mr. Nunez just described how he demonstrated proficiency in the visual and performing arts standards. So at the end of his first year, he will have earned 65 credits. When he comes back for his second year, again, he will have some double up periods where he earns 10 credits. And because he has a job, there will be option 2 for those 5 credits. To preempt a possible question, there is not a limit that they can only earn 5 credits in option 2, whether it's visual performing arts standards or through work-based learning in a given year. But this is just an example schedule. I do make the note at the bottom that this satisfies the New Jersey Department of Education 120 credit requirement. It would fall under the waiver that would be presented to Dr. McLaughlin and presented to the board. That would not be the 140 credits that there are for Dover Board of Ed, specific local requirements. So this obviously is a pressing question. What is the financial impact? Well, we must acknowledge that there is going to be a rental cost. There are building changes that the architect mentioned before with multiple interior walls to ensure that we have the proper classroom size for our students and specific to our programming. So when we think of that career and technical education program for graphic design, having a bigger space of over 1,000 square feet provides a real world experience for our students. This is an example of the staffing requirements that will be necessary, as we know, for a building. I will tell you, we do not have exact numbers at this time, though we don't have exact numbers for Dover High School for the 24-25 school year because we have not done the master scheduling process. We do not know exactly how many students are going to be there. But this is, at this moment, the best educated guess as to what our needs will be as we are looking at this and pushing this forward. There will also be an impact on transportation, and thank you for our traffic consultant for being here tonight. We appreciate you being here. That is being looked at because we know that there is traffic down in downtown. It's just a fact of life at this point. But to alleviate that as best we can, students will report to Dover High School in the morning. They will not be driving directly to the building or being dropped off at the building by their parents. They are going to come to Dover High School. Obviously, we have the option for breakfast in the morning as well. They will then take the bus down to Newberry. There will be a two 56-passenger bus that goes in the morning and also comes back in the afternoon. There will be a midday bus because we do have our graphic design students who would be half day at Newberry and half day at Dover High School.
So we recognize that there are other considerations and limitations. One of the considerations in the acquirement of this building is that we don't need to have significant upgrades as opposed to maybe taking an older building. We do have a building that is ADA compliant, has an HVAC system, sprinkler system. It already has wiring for the network and an elevator. The building does not have a gym, but we do have a nearby facility that the owner, I believe, is the owner of, that would be willing to allow us to use that space. Again, exact staffing needs are not known until the scheduling process begins, and that would be the same for every year when we begin looking at our budgetary needs, which has not happened yet for the 24-25 school year. And then, again, traffic implications are being evaluated by a traffic consultant. Hi, traffic consultant. And again, this is not something that we're looking at the now. We are looking to make this a program that will last for many years to come. So obviously we will be evaluating our program and student needs. We look to, as the years come, increase the number of students in Newberry because we look to increase the number of programs offered there. We look to bring in work-based opportunities to our students through school to work, internships, and a school-based enterprise, and additional career and technical education programs, which may include child development, credential in QuickBooks through a finance program, possible cosmetology certification and partnering with local businesses, and dance and music production. Again, these are some of the ideas that we are looking for as far as a vision beyond the 24-25 school year. I'd like to thank everyone for giving us the opportunity to present this vision to you. And at this time, we take any questions. Thank you.
Just before questions begin, I want to acknowledge that there's some information, I'm sure the board is aware of this, but just for the public, in terms of specific rental cost or what costs would be associated with, for example, the walls, that type of information is contained within contract negotiations, so it's not part of the information that we could share specifically tonight. But I can say that rental of facilities was anticipated in this present year's budget, and we are confident that what has been budgeted, what was planned in the budget, would accomplish the final price of a lease should the board commit to that. So I just wanted to mention that before we got into the questions.
Thank you for that clarification, Dr. McLaughlin. Let's give the presenters a round of applause, please. And now we will take questions from the board. Dr. Sainer.
Thank you, Ms. Mendez. I have to admit, I was struggling to pay attention. Thank you, Dr. McLaughlin and the presenters for having this done so that we could get it early. I was dumbstruck by the numbers that you reported at the beginning, Dr. McLaughlin, from the State of New Jersey report that says that we have inadequate capacity for our students. With having 1,530 students in elementary schools that will hold 911 if you round, that puts our capacity at 170% of what we're supposed to have. And what popped into my head was a lot of us drive a 5-seat car, right? And asking us to put 170% of the capacity in our 5-seater car is asking us to drive around in our Honda Civic with 8.4 people. And that's what we're asking our staff and our students to do. And if we wonder why our graduation rates are low and our test scores are low, like every discussion I think I've been a part of serving this year and in previous years on the curriculum committee, on the finance committee, so many of our decisions are made based on capacity because of the struggles that we're having. And I know that we're overcrowded, I know that we have a problem, and those numbers just really shocked me, even though I knew them. Moving on. The number of classes that we have that are greater than 26 students, I'm happy to see that that has gone down with the addition of significant teachers this school year, but it's still far too high. I wanted to thank whoever came up with the idea of Fernando, because I think there are many Fernandos in our district. I remember a student, when I saw the presentation, I remember a student from many years ago when I was a Dover teacher, Ms. Phillips knows this student as well, who came in over age, under credit, and with no pathway to graduation because of that. And to think that we could, I believe it's 42 students, to think that every year perhaps 42 students could leave Dover High School not early because they have no pathway forward, or leave with some credits but not all, I think that is a huge advantage of this program. I do have significant concerns because it's October, we are being asked to put a significant amount of resources into renovations of a building that we do not own, the lease agreement, the potential for additional staff, and this carries with it some unknowns in terms of, yes, we have the money this year, but we're never quite sure what kind of funding we'll get in subsequent years, right? The state has made improvements and with equalization aid, and Dover has certainly benefited from that. But I do have some concerns about our abilities to sustain such a big investment moving forward. but I don't see any other solutions. We have, with the overcrowding, we just don't have a lot of solutions, and this provides opportunities for a number of Dover students. I wanted to thank you for answering. I had submitted some questions. Every single one of them was answered. How do we go about, I guess, Ms. Sullivan, I didn't prepare this question, but my concerns about the budget, how do we go about budgeting for the future this year in October with so many uncertainties? Can you describe that process a little bit? Because there's a lot of unknowns, right? We know how many students we might send over there. We know what our current funding level is. How do we as a board make sure that we don't invest in something that we cannot sustain?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer because you are subject to a cap as well on your tax levy. So what you would need to do in the near future would be to estimate what the staffing needs would be, how many teachers. I mean, you're going to need to do that anyway. I would assume your budget process would normally start in November. In my prior districts, the schools were asked to give budget information by early December so that we could start compiling the budget for the entire district. So I know usually in like January, I would say mid to end January, you would know what next year's, a draft of what next year's budget would look like. And you may have to start looking at other programs in the district to see if you needed to make reductions in order to get to your cap. But it's a time-consuming process and a process that would, and then from there you would start looking at years ahead to see what staffing needs. I would assume that facility isn't going to grow unless you're going to implement a plan where you're going to put say 5 teachers in one year and then 10 teachers the following. I'm making up numbers. I don't know how many teachers are needed there. But if you're phasing in the program, then you could do it that way as well. But with the 2% cap, you're constrained anyway, because usually your salaries are your salary increases are eating up that cap before you even add staff. So it's an uphill battle for sure with your budget.
I'm sorry, Ms. Grisales. I know, Ms. Nutting, you had raised your hand before, too. Do you want to go?
Basically, Dr. Santner actually asked a lot of the same questions, and during the presentation, those, like how many students we were helping and all of those questions that I had sent previously were kind of answered. Only question that wasn't answered is, I know that when we look at some of the New Jersey reports, there was recently an article talking about how the decline of birth rates have gone down and that some districts are being affected, and population. I know our district is a little bit different, but how long of a time span do you think, if we had brought this in, would we be renting the space?
As you mentioned, we don't fit a lot of those districts that are seeing declining enrollment, and there are districts around us who are experiencing declining enrollment where that presents a big issue, and some counties in New Jersey in particular are really experiencing that. But I would say that certainly over a significant amount of time, Dover has had a stable population and an incremental growth. I mean, we've been big for a while, and we're still big, and we are creeping up. One of the issues is that, and it's been brought up in various meetings and in commentaries, that we enroll a lot of kids, but we have a lot of students who also exit every year, but our overall population still is trending up, but no one has a crystal ball. Could that all change 10 years from now? It could be. The number of years on the lease would be something the board would have to consider when it looks at that, and what length of investment they would make in a rental property. An advantage of a rental property, however, is that if the population goes down, you are not married to that facility like you are to one that you own, and then you have to make a decision on what to do with it. And there are districts right now, the board's aware of it because we've been invited to some of those districts to look at whole schools that are sitting empty.
Thank you.
Ms. Grisales.
In that same vein, I have quite a few questions, but really amount of years cap, right? I believe we have, we can only lease for a certain amount of years. Is that correct? Do I remember 5 years versus 10 years?
Well, there's a 5-year limit on leases without substantial state approval, but it is possible to do a longer term lease. It just requires a different level of review and approval by the state.
Okay. Since this is a rented space, what guarantee would we have that the owners or future owners will only lease the first floor to school-friendly businesses? I don't know who can answer that.
Mr. I think that's
Crickets.
Mr. Crude, can you speak to that, please?
Well, that could be something that could, again, I just want to make it clear that this is, the whole thing tonight is a presentation to give the public an idea of things that are being considered. But the board isn't taking any formal action tonight. That is something that could possibly be addressed in lease negotiation.
Okay. I heard about 100 students, 4 class periods. Do we know about how many additional classrooms this will actually give our district? I don't remember hearing that number.
Yes, I think it was mentioned, and I think Mr. Hicks was the one who mentioned it. We talked about sections. So unlike elementary classrooms, high school space needs to be looked at in sections.
So at Dover High School, with the 100 students, for every 100 students that would to go over to Newberry, we would free up about 32 sections throughout the course of the day. Now that would be in various different departments. So similar to a 3rd grade class that might lose 4 students, we're not closing an entire 3rd grade, but there would be less English classes, less math classes, less across the board for a total of 32 per 100 students. So if we did reach capacity of 200 plus students, we're then looking at doubling that 32 to 64 through the master schedule. Sections. So a section would be a period 1 in room 305 as an example. So we would have 32 of those that would be throughout the master schedule, or if we hit 200 the following year, 64.
Okay.
I just want to elaborate, since you're talking about sections right now, because I don't know, it was a point that we certainly implied but may not have been explicit about, that when we talked about the numbers of students who are in sections, I'm going to call them overpopulated sections in the high school, by freeing up sections, it allows us to make a decision to split a class if we needed to. Right now, for example, in period 1, if we had a period 1 or 9 where we had 32 students in a class and we wanted to make that 16 each, we couldn't do it with space. We don't have the space to split that class. So those sections, the available sections, we talked about teacher availability and new programs, and that's all very true, but it also gives us the opportunity to split those sections, which if you had the space, you would want to do.
And I know that no one here is a traffic expert, and the traffic expert is not going to answer questions today, but what are we seeing that is needed or anticipated to ensure the safety of our community, but especially of our staff or students in that area?
So maybe, Pete, can I throw that one over to you to talk about some of the considerations?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? There we go.
No.
No.
What traffic, just kidding. What traffic studies are you anticipating that we need in order to ensure the safety of all?
That's a great question.
And that's what you say when you don't know the answer.
That's why we bring in our experts to hear what she just brought up. But one of the things that we looked at as an architect in general, right? It's my job to bring in people that are experts, right, to add their expertise in those specific fields. So when I looked at the high school, and I understand that we will be first traveling to the high school first, the students, and then 2 buses only coming to Newberry, intuitively that made sense to me, as opposed to sending several different buses throughout the district to Newberry in lieu of going to the high school first. I also know, in talking with the owner, again, through the various site visits, that there is some off-street parking that could also be a consideration during the lease negotiations, Mr. Crew. That could be a plus as well, so your teachers or staff would not have to find on-street parking. That would certainly be a plus. In being there on several different occasions, both in the afternoon and in the morning, again, I am no traffic expert, but I found that Bassett Highway is probably the least of the 4 intertwining streets, certainly a lot less traffic than Sussex and Blackwell. That lends itself to bus drop-off and pickup. And I like the fact that when the bus would pull up, it would be on the right curb, so the students would exit directly out onto the sidewalk and not have to cross the street, and then just walk literally about 50 feet around the corner and into the facility. So there's a lot of pluses, but what kind of traffic impact? I think that's something that we'll leave with certainly the traffic engineer. I think it was something that when we started looking at this facility, we said we absolutely need it, because it will be probably more prominent and discussed at the planning board meeting, and they better be ready by then. But they will be. But I hope I answered your question, but that's where I can see it as an architect to reply to that.
Thank you. And similar to that, but probably not for you, how will loss of learning time be addressed due to that transportation, that travel, which is a great idea, but between that Dover High School and Newberry, how would that impact students?
Well, Google Earth says it's about a 7-minute drive, so I don't know.
That's 'cause you don't live in Dover.
It was mostly blue. If you look at it, it was mostly a little bit of yellow on the end, but I think it should be fine. At 1.6 miles, again, no traffic, but that's a great question to ask about what kind of time
I think
lost.
our high school administration has looked at that, so they can speak to it.
So we did look into that, and we did take that into consideration. We know that we would need to probably we want to create as similar a schedule as possible between the 2 schools here and Newberry, but we did take that into consideration when looking at the planning. And there would be time built in, so that way when they get to Newberry, it would be a similar schedule as we could get to here.
Okay, almost done. If we look at the moving date as September 24th, right, knowing that there's going to be construction that needs to happen inside the building by the district, when do we actually anticipate, or can we anticipate students to actually arrive at Newberry? Not at September 2024, I'm assuming.
Yes, I want to indicate that there's not substantial modification. There's 5 walls, and this absolutely is something that Pete can add to. So that we don't anticipate would cause a delay.
Right. Thanks, Zach. This is something, as an architect, I can answer. So in receiving information from the district, again, in looking at this as a possibility, I received the information from Dr. McLaughlin, I assume from you gentlemen, about taking down walls and taking what would have been 2 500-square-foot rooms and making it one big 1,000-square-foot room. Is that possible? In analyzing it, one of the first things we looked at was, is it a bearing wall? Does it hold the building up, or is it a non-bearing wall? It is a non-bearing wall, which means it's 2 pieces of sheetrock, a couple of metal studs, maybe there's some electrical. It's not a heavy lift to do. In analyzing what is requested, we felt that it was possible. We then took the extra step. We called the owner and we sent him the documents saying, hey, if we remove this wall and this wall and this wall, do you see it as any kind of major issue? He took a day or two, got back to me and said, not an issue at all. And again, that would then probably be part of any kind of lease negotiation as part of assuming this. He would be required to take these walls down in due time. I don't think it's a heavy lift at all to do that. And from the pictures that you saw that I gave you, the rooms are finished, the floors are tiled, the walls are painted sheetrock, the ceilings are finished with light fixtures. It's fairly. One of the considerations would be the technology that you would want to bring in with you, the smart boards or any kind of that technology, and then any type of loose furniture. Those things would be the issues at hand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How would this added space improve student achievement scores after our first presentation? How does this help our general student achievement growth?
If you look at the ability to be able to acquire more space in the building, number one, as Dr. McLaughlin had said, we can take courses and make them smaller. Smaller courses provides us a better opportunity to be able to give more concentrated learning for our students, okay? Number two, when we're looking at the students in the Newberry building, particularly those who we would be working with our option two, again, we're looking at a standards-based type of learning, which means that we're not going through an entire year's worth of course load. We're looking at targeting the specific standards that they need to master in order to achieve that at that grade level, and then moving on to the next, hopefully with that concentrated look in, as far as education goes. And those students should also then be able to excel in their coursework because we're providing really targeted instruction in that area. So you're looking at it both by reducing class size and being able to have less students in the classroom, which provides a more optimal learning environment. And then on the other side, with the use of option two, we can provide more targeted instruction because we're looking at meeting specific standards.
Can I just add just one very practical piece as a former high school teacher? One of the things that we know helps student learning, this is not new news at all, is by having students work cooperatively, work in groups, break out. Our classrooms, we talked about how many classrooms have 26 or 27, but by the end of the year, each year, we have classes over 30. If you have 32 students, 33 students in one of our high school classrooms, nobody can move. I mean, their desks are where they are. So it increases the ability for a teacher to conduct their craft of instruction and help kids learn in the way that we know that they should be able to learn. So I think that everything that Mr. Nunes said is absolutely true, but I think also just the ability to manipulate your students within a classroom, which we know is a very basic of teaching philosophy.
Thank you. And my last question related to option two, not so much the space, but I saw that in Fernando's schedule, 2-year schedule, we're talking about ESL classes in first period, let's say, and all the other classes, right, English, math, are those provided in Spanish, in English, or both languages in that option two?
That's a very good question.
I'm getting that a lot tonight.
Well, I mean, it certainly could be a consideration when we're talking about looking at staffing needs. Again, we don't have that information readily available at that time, but that is something that we could be looking at with those particular students.
Thank you for your patience.
Ms. Acevedo?
We have seen an uptick of petty crime, vagrancy in that area. Have we considered how we're going to keep our students safe in that area? Also, the bus unloading on that side of Bassett Highway, there is a bar there. Are we considering all these factors?
Yes, we are aware of that. Actually, it was a discussion that we had. Department of Education has also already weighed in on the location. I think because it's a very controlled entrance and exit, we're not talking about kids coming in like they would to the high school from all different methods, but that it's controlled primarily through bus arrival and dismissal with a short space between the door and the bus, that we don't expect that students will be exposed to the facets that you mentioned. The building itself would be secured. We would have security there, just like we've added security to all of our buildings. So there would be, the locked door feature. There's I think almost a natural vestibule in the building, which is really good in terms of that's a movement that we're trying to do within our schools. And so and certainly once within the building, we would expect that our students would be safe. That would absolutely be a priority for us.
If we're using the Dover Sportsplex, the students will have to walk a distance. So how are we managing that? They're walking in inclement weather. I just think that we have to consider a lot of things here, especially with that. And is the Dover Sportsplex, do we have to pay an added expense to use that facility, or is the owner of the Dover Sportsplex is the owner of the building as well as Newberry's?
It is the same owner, and I don't want to delve too much into contract negotiations.
Of course.
But the owner has been very flexible in our conversations, so I'm optimistic. I guess that's the best thing I could say about that. We're looking at a couple of different pieces with the phys ed component. Again, this building provides us some flexibility that we wouldn't have at the high school. But for example, if you would expand the time of the phys ed class, you wouldn't necessarily have to provide phys ed every day. You could provide it, for example, 3 days a week with different timing on the periods. You could also arrange, and of course this would be another area for our traffic consultant, we've pointed to you many times tonight, to look at the possibility of a beginning of the day for a number of the students at phys ed, where they could be dropped off there, where there's only one walk back to the school itself versus a walk to and from. So those are some of the things that we would look at. Again, some of this would really need to be fleshed out, but what you're bringing up, we did a sample walk ourselves, just to see how much time it would take and what the hazards are along the way. Obviously that's much more informal than our traffic consultant would provide to us.
And just to add to that, we have students right now outside in inclement weather. Don't forget, we have the trailers over here that students are walking to every day, Mr. Nunez, for health and PE courses. So they are exposed to the elements throughout their day. And previous to that, it was North Dover students who were going in and out of the North Dover building into the trailers every day in inclement weather. When we walked to the Sportsplex, Mr. Nunez, 2 blocks?
It's about 3 blocks.
3 blocks?
Yeah, about a 3-4 minute walk.
Right.
And yes, our students are going to the trailers every period of every day in every type of weather.
I understand that, but I feel it's a more controlled environment.
Pose.
Ms. Mendes, could we have an anticipated time of return? Or how
10
long will be?
minutes. That was traumatizing for me personally, and I'm sure for all of you. I can't imagine when children have to experience that. The responsible thing to do at this time, until we can ensure the full safety and security of all of us, the police are still investigating. So I think the responsible thing at this time is to motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Oppose.
Opposed.
The ayes have it. Meeting adjourned.